Hi everyone, this is a video about how you can make your own stockings with knitted fabric and also use embroidery on them from machine embroidery, just like these. This is the second part of two videos. The first video covers a lot of ground as far as making these stockings. And the pattern we're using is Laughing Moon Mercantile number 202, and it's right behind here. And it comes in 3 different styles, and each one is 3 different sizes, small, medium, and large, which could be translated to children's, women's, and men's. In the other video, I explain a whole lot of things, so I won't be doing it in this video. In that video, I explain the reasons why you might want to make your own stockings, and there's a lot of them. I also talk in depth about the appropriate fabrics to make stockings out of, and pretty much where to find them and how to tell if they're appropriate. I also talk about alterations to the pattern, just in case the pattern does not fit you out of the box, in the ways that you can alter the pattern to make sure your stockings fit. In this video, I'm going to be talking about preparing the fabric for embroidery, marking it, actually doing the embroidery, then how to cut out the stocking after you've embroidered the fabric. In this case, you actually embroider the fabric first, and then you cut out the stocking and make it up. So that's what we're going to be covering in this video. And then after you cut out the stocking after it's been embroidered, you go back to the other video and it will show you step by step how to construct the stockings. This is my name. This is my website. This is where you can find the pattern. It's number 202 for stockings. Here's the actual place where you can actually go right directly to the stockings. Here's where you can look on our website for machine embroidery that is appropriate for stockings. And for a short history of stockings, you can go to this blog spot. And for Pinterest boards, you'll find all kinds of inspiration from historical to modern on Pinterest. And here's one of my Pinterest boards where I have stockings. As far as embroidered stockings, which fabric? We're going to be using 4-way stretch knit fabric to make these stockings. You don't have to know how to knit at all. You're going to be sewing these stockings together. We're going to be talking about preparing the fabric for embroidery, marking it, and then after you've done that, you can either take it to an embroiderer if you don't have an embroidery machine, or you don't have a friend that has one. So you can go and take it to an embroiderer. There are embroiderers all over the United States, and I'm quite sure Europe. In fact, I live in a small town in Northern California, and there are 2 retail embroiderers just in my small town. And then, after we talk about all this, once again I'll say, go to the other video, or the printed instructions on how to actually construct the stockings. Many people have a machine that can only do 5x7. The good news is that all of my embroideries, even though some of them are 10 inches long, I have split them out so that if you only have this size hoop, you can still embroider your stockings. It would be a case of continuous embroidery. First you do the top, and then you do the bottom, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So now what I'm going to do is lay out some fabric, and I'm going to take my patterns, and I'm going to mark the fabric and show you how you mark where you want the embroidery to be so that it's correct when you go to cut out and make your stockings. Let's get started marking our fabric in preparations for embroidery. I have taken the pattern and I've set it onto my fabric. Now I use cardboard because I make so many of these, so it's just easier for me. And I've made all the patterns in cardboard. Now view A only has 2 pieces, but right now all we care about is the body, the leg part of the stocking, because that's where the embroidery is going to go. We'll cut this out later. This is the foot part. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you have to watch me do it, is I'm going to sketch an outline around the entire stocking onto the fabric. I'm using these Crayola Ultra Clean washable markers. They come out for me. I put a little spray and wash on them or whatever, and they come out right away. But test first, because I don't want to tell you to use these if it doesn't come out of your fabric. And everything we do really should be washable, because you're going to want to wash your socks. So this fabric has been already washed, and anything that was in it is out. It's been washed and dried, so it is shrunk. So I'm going to just smooth this out, and the first thing I'm going to do is make an outline all the way around the sock. This shows me exactly where the toe and where the top is, so that I can have a relative position where I know I want my embroidery to be. Now, I'll just tell you right now that this embroidery is the one that I've chosen for this sock. It's called 302-3. There's one, I found this in the Beta Shoe Museum. This is what it looks like. Here's another version of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to embroider it in 5x7, which means I'll have to do 2 different hoopings. I'm going to show you how to do that. Here's the whole embroidery. Here's the embroidery divided in half. Here's the top, and here is the bottom. So I'll be doing a bit of paper dolls when I go to hoop. But first, let's mark the sock on the outside of the sock so I know exactly what I'm getting into. Now, this can be very general, because, and when you mark knit, it'll chatter because it moves around so much. So I'm just telling myself basically where is this sock, so I know the top and I know the bottom. Now, this is not set in stone. If something happens with your embroidery and you need to move this out a bit, you can, because it hasn't been cut out yet, so you can move it around. So I've done that, and now I'm going to mark where actually while it's here, I'm going to do all the important markings, which, here's the center of the front of the toe, here's a marking here, here. These correspond to the foot. Here's a mark here, and here's a mark here for the heel, which is a really important marking for view A. I'm going to do the same thing. Now what I'm going to do is mark the embroidery lines. Now I want side embroidery, which is 2 embroideries on either side of the leg. There's another embroidery type where you put it right down the middle, but this one I want 2 on either side. So I need to know the lines that are appropriate here. And what you'll notice is they're not perpendicular to center front, if you will, or the middle of this stocking. And that's because most people's calves are larger than their ankles, and so it looks better to have it angled this way, and so it looks more like it's in the center of your calf rather than right alongside the front. And this is something you might want to change. If your calves are large, you might want to angle that even more going that direction. This would be something you would just have to experiment with. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to mark my embroidery lines. And these are the lines that you're going to use to center it in the hoop. So depending on how big your hoop is, you want these lines to be really pretty long. And at least for views A and B. View C is a different animal. We'll talk about that. So I'm going to mark one side pink and the other side gold or orange, because it may be that I have a left and a right. And in this case, this is symmetrical, so it doesn't matter. But if you did have one that had and there are designs that are different, you might want to flip it, and so that they're flipped, so they're not exactly the same. Although nobody's really going to notice, because people usually only see one side of your leg at a time. I'm going to use pink for the left side and orange for the right, just so I can keep them straight. I also like to write top and bottom and the view on it. This also helps me to keep straight, because when I go to the embroidery machine, it's going to be a big ball of fabric, and if you put it in there backwards, you're going to have the top, the bottom, and etc. So that's another reason for tracing the whole sock on the outside. So here we have, I'm going to make this side orange and this side pink or whatever. And I'm just marking these at the bottom and at the top. However, you can extend these lines, and I'll show you quick why you might want to do that. If you're going to use this small of a hoop, your lines don't have to be that long. They're going to fit inside the hoop. But if you're going to use this, your line, see, that doesn't even get to the edge where I want to know where I'm centered. So you could be moving these around quite a bit, so you can make your lines really long in either direction. But now that I've marked this, I'm going to take this out. I can see my marks, and I'm going to draw my embroidery lines. Here's my orange line. Now, you're at this point, your fabric is not particularly stable. You can treat your fabric, as I mentioned in the other video, with either spray starch or something called Terrial Magic. That will make it a lot firmer and less squirmy. Even if you use this, though, you're still going to have to use backing, and we'll talk about that. But at least for now, it would make your fabric a little less squirmy. So I'm going to mark this. And I'm going to stop right here. This gives me a relative line as opposed to over here when I go to center. Or place my embroidery. Now if I want to, if I've got a really big hoop, I can extend this way up. That'll give me a really big line that I can center right into my hoop. For this one, I'm going to use the 5x7 so that you can see how much you can make these even if you don't have a really giant hoop. And I'm going to set all this aside, and I'm going to stabilize the area where I'm going to embroider. And I'm going to use this stabilizer. I'd rather have it, I got this one, this fits in 5x7. The larger sizes go to the 6x8 hoops. But what I want to do is stabilize this, not just so it fits in the hoop. This fits exactly in a 5x7 hoop, but also outside too. And because these, and I want to do it pretty long because the whole hooping area I would like to stabilize. Now you don't have to do that. You can just stabilize the area in which you're going to embroider. But with knits, it does stretch a bit when you push down in the hoop. So you're going to have to deal with a little bit of stretching and hoop burn. But after all, you're going to end up washing these anyway. And this particular bagging is wash away. And the reason I like wash away for this is that you can wash it and it completely disappears any place that's not actually stitched. And what that does is return your knit to as much stretchiness as it can have, even though it's been embroidered. If you have the cutaways, sometimes there'll be bits in there that you can't get out, and so it kind of is a little bit more stable, and that's a bad thing when you're trying to do a sock, especially when you've got clocking around the ankle and you want to get your foot past that clocking. So that's why I like it. So now I know that I'm going to stabilize this on the wrong side. This is the side I'm going to embroider on. So I'm going to take my pictures, and for this I'm going to use the whole one because I can tell from the whole one exactly where it starts and stops, as opposed to the two pieces, although the two pieces do fit together, and we'll do a little cutout doll thing to do that. But here I've got it folded in half, so I can put this pretty much where I think I want the center of it to be. So here's the ankle, and so if you want it above the ankle, if you want it below the ankle, that's totally up to you where you want it. So I'm going to place this, let's say, pretty close to the ankle here. So I'm going to make a little mark here so I can get an idea of what the size of the whole embroidery is. It's right here, and it's right here. That's the top, more or less where that is. Now I'm going to get a pair of scissors and some tape, and what I'm going to do, here's the same embroidery split, and I'm going to put them together, and you can look at your original and figure out which is which. I'm going to cut and paste this, and what that's going to do is tell me where to hoop, because you hoop on the center lines. So this is the line we just drew, and now we're going to draw these lines. Now if I was going to use a big hoop, all I would need to know is this line and this line, and then the machine does the rest. Okay, here's the orientation of the stocking. There's the toe, there's the top. This I know, this is the top and this is the bottom of my embroidery. Now I'm going to take my two 5x7s and I'm going to overlay this and stick them together so they look exactly like that. And I'm going to use my ruler to make sure that they are exactly aligned, and they are. So I'm going to tape this together. And if you're wondering, you can overlay this onto the full-size one. Make sure you're relatively the same. Okay, that looks pretty good. So, okay, I've got this taped. Now, if we were using a big hoop, once again, we would mark this where we wanted it, and then at 90 degrees, right in the center, and it always shows you that. It gives you this line, and it always shows you what the center is. That's all hooping is getting it in the center of the hoop. So, since I've got this, I know I'm going to have to hoop twice for my smaller hoop. So I'm going to fold this down the middle. And that's more or less correct. And I'm going to put that, remember I made those little marks about exactly where I wanted my embroidery. And that fits in there very well. And now I mark the perpendicular lines. This is the center of the bottom part. Let's do orange. And you want to go pretty far because you want to center it in the hoop by using the center marks that are on the hoop. So I'm going to go way over here, make this line, move this out of the way, and continue on. Okay, that is the center line for the bottom embroidery. Now I'm going to make the center line for the top embroidery. And if you had a big hoop, you would only have one center line, obviously. So I've got this one way out here like that, and this, and I go way down here like that. And these should be perpendicular to each other, equidistance away. So now I've got my markings for this side, and I'm going to do this side first because then I'm going to use the bare hoop. So this is for a twice hooping of a 5x7. So what I'm going to do now is flip this over, and I'm going to put down the backing on this. And I want to make sure that it's backed all the way where my hoop might be. Okay, I've hooped the top embroidery in the crosshairs of my hoop. I have reduced the size of the arm so that it fits a 5x7. I have downloaded the top embroidery, and I have chosen the color that I want, or the needle. I'm going to place this hoop in the machine. I've already checked to make sure I've got enough bobbin thread. So I'm going to stick this in here. Okay, the top part is finished. So I'm going to take that off and show it to you. There's the top part. So now I have to re-hoop this. Pop that out. Move this down to the second. Marking. Where I think I've got it right about centered. Take a look here. I've gotten the bottom part of the embroidery in the correct format. I've loaded into my machine, so this hopefully has been pretty well hooped. We'll see how it turns out. Once again, I'm going to turn this towards me. So we'll see where it starts, and it's starting exactly where it should. Okay, the machine has stopped and we've finished our embroidery, both top and bottom. And when I said it was starting exactly where it should, I would have to say it's off by maybe 1/8 of an inch at most, 1/16 of an inch. Here's the embroidery. This is the top embroidery. Here's the bottom embroidery. So you can do this whole thing with only a 5x7. And as far as what's off, it's going to be really hard for you to see, but it's where the two join together. There's a spot right there where it should be 1/8 of an inch, a little bit higher, so that this could be joined to this. But I think it'd be pretty difficult for anybody to actually see that as a problem. I look back at some of my video and I see that I cut off my head for a lot of it, but you know, looking at me isn't what you really want to see anyway, so I'm fine with that. What you really want to see is what's going on with the embroidery. So, alright, so remember we did this. This is view A, but it could be A or B. We have finished the embroidery for it. This is how it's oriented. This was the side where we did the two 5x7s. This is the side where I did the big hoop, but you can see they really look similar. And this is what this should look like when you're getting ready to cut out your fabric. So now this looks pretty good. I don't think I'm going to have to move my pattern around. I could cut on the black lines and I would be fine. But if you've made a mistake or there's something you don't like about it or you want to move it up or down, at this point you can do that. For instance, let's say I wanted to change this. So that this came way down. All I would do is reposition my pattern and make it that much shorter or longer. Or let's say I wanted to make it go way up the side. Well, of course, I've come to the end of my, but I could also do that. So you can change your mind after it's been embroidered. This looks pretty good. Now at this point, once it looks like this, you go back to the other video and it'll show you how to cut this out, and cut out the other piece, and it'll show you how to put it together. So it'll turn into a sock. Well, let's go back now to view C and work on that. Here's my view C that I have traced. Now what I want to do now is position my embroidery exactly where I want it. So what I'm going to do is move the camera forward a little bit, and so you can actually see me placing the embroidery where I want it on view C. And here's, you see. So I've already got my important dots placed. The ones for situating the toe correctly, the ones for situating the gore correctly. I've got this nice and stabilized. Now I need to place my embroidery. I decided to use this embroidery. This is number 5, 3025. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position the embroidery around the slash marks. Remember, this is where the gore is going to go. So I'm going to go slash this right up the middle. Oops, sorry. And I need to put, I'm going to fold this in half. Like that. Now, that's where the end of the slash line has to come. I hope you can see that. Is right there. Or a little bit further down, but not too much further up, because then you'll start to be cutting in to the embroidery. So I'm going to place this in a spot that I like, which is, I'm going to leave a lot of room up there. So I'm going to align this with my line here. You can see that the top is way below the top of that. It's like a ½ inch down here like this. This on it so it doesn't move. And now I'm going to mark the center line. I'm going to make sure you can see that pretty well. My center line, always with the center line. That's what your machine wants to know about. So I'm going to fold this up on the center line. Make sure it's still centered over my slash line. And I'm going to mark my center of my embroidery. This is green, so I'll use green. And I want to make sure that when I mark this, it's perpendicular to my line. Way over like that. Fold this. Go way over like that. So that is the center line for my embroidery, because a lot of it goes way beyond the slash line. I'm going to do the same thing. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pink. I'm going to make the center line for my pink by measuring the green. From the top, it's only, that's a ½ inch. So if I go down here, I go over here and I make a mark ½ inch, then it's going to be at the same place on these. So I square out from that, and that should be my center line. Now that doesn't look exactly right, so I'm going to check it. You see, the place where they cross should be right in the middle of that line. Let's make sure I squared out correctly. I did. So the middle of that line, it's 4, let's say it's 5, so 2.5. So 2.5 would be right there. So I'm going to redraw my line so that it squares out right there in the middle of the green. That's a much better line. This is going to be my center line because this is a little bit more than a half. So now I'm more like a half. So if you see, those cross in the correct way. Okay, great. Now I have two center lines. This is the top of the slash line. There's the top of the pink slash line. And then because they're not parallel to each other, they cross at an angle. And I can see that I've got it correct because right in the middle is where they cross. This goes under. Here's my fabric. Here's the toe. Here's the thigh. Here's my green center line for the right hand side. So I'm ready to go. Once again, slide it in. Okay, because I know where the center of this is. It's oriented correctly around the slash line, and I just start it. It's going to start at the very top and embroider. So I have finished embroidering this. I've got both sides embroidered. And I used a light purple on this side and a dark purple on this. And the reason for the dark is because I think you can see it better. This light doesn't show very well. But anyway, when I put this into the machine to do the other side, I noticed right away that I had done a pretty horrible job of centering it. And I was going to stop and recenter it, but then I thought, well, why not show what can happen, how you can salvage something like this? Because if this is really bad, then your whole thing is just shot. You're going to have to throw away your fabric, and it's just not pleasant. But I think I can salvage this. It's not going to be too bad. And the reason for it is, even if I've done a bad job, I can do some things to compensate for it. And maybe it's not a total loss after all. And if you can see, it's pretty obvious how I did a terrible job. This should have been right up the middle of these legs. And this should have been squared off. Not even close. I'm too far over here, and I'm much too far over here. So I'm going to unhoop this and then move the camera closer so you can see what I'm doing. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this and redraw that, taking into consideration what I've done wrong. Zoomed in on the stockings, and though you probably couldn't say what I was talking about before, I will put the... Now this I did a pretty good job. This line is pretty much right down the center of this lighter embroidery. But when I come over here, it's way over. It's probably a 1/4 of an inch off, which in some cases might be fatal, and you might not be able to use this. But all I'm going to do in this case, if I can, and I think I can, is redraw the outside of the sock so that it takes into consideration this. So I'm going to start by centering this more or less over the stocking the way it's been done, and taking a look at this. So this dot and this dot were where I should have lined up this and this. But because this one's so far over, I'm just going to scoot this over to compensate for that. So it's about, if I look at this, like I said, it's about a 1/4 of an inch off. So basically all I'm going to do is move this over a 1/4 of an inch. Here is simply redraw the outline. And that will again center these. Even though this is too far over this way, I've just managed to compensate for that by the way I've centered my pattern. So now what I'm going to do is show you how to prepare to insert the gores, even though you have a mistake. So what I'm going to do is just redraw the line where you're going to cut this. This one's still good. I'm going to leave that one just like it is. And this one I'm going to redraw simply by moving it over. Here's the top where I want to stop, and I'm going to just draw a new line that reflects the center of where this embroidery actually is, rather than where it ought to be. So when I go to cut this, now remember I would have retraced the outside of this line, and so this one I'm going to cut right up the center, stopping at the top. It's as far as you should go because this is the length of the gore. Over here, I'm going to cut on my new line, stopping at the top, this is where you insert the gore. You stop right there. And this is why it should only be this long. That's as far as you can cut, because that's however long the gore is, and the gore is going to be inserted right here in between the embroidery, as you can see right there. So we're pretty much done with the embroidery part of the video.